I've been delivering food for the past 3 years. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills, and most of the time, it's pretty straightforward. You pick up an order, drop it off, get a tip, and move on to the next one. Nothing unusual, right? Well, at least that's what I thought, until last month. I still can't explain what happened that night, and I'm not sure I even want to try. All I know is that it changed me. I haven't delivered food since. It was a Friday night, which meant peak hours for deliveries. The app was buzzing non-stop, and I'd already knocked out 10 orders by the time the clock hit 11 p.m. The tips had been decent, and I was planning to call it a night after 1 or 2 more deliveries. That's when the notification came in, order number 3457. Pickup from Luigi's Pizzeria, delivery to 814 Galloway Lane. Luigi's was one of my regular spots, and their orders were always ready on time. But Galloway Lane? That was unusual. It was a quiet, dead-end street on the outskirts of town, surrounded by old, decaying houses and dense woods. I'd only been there once before, and it gave me the creeps. Still, the tip was good, $1.15 for a 20-minute drive. I accepted the order. When I arrived at Luigi's, the place was quieter than usual. Most of the lights were off, except for a dim glow in the kitchen. I parked in front, walked inside, and called out, "Hey, I'm here for the Galloway Lane order." The owner, Sal, poked his head out from the back. His expression was strange. He looked tired, sure, but there was something else, like he was worried. "You got the Galloway order?" he asked, almost cautiously. "Yeah," I said. "Something wrong?" He hesitated, wiping his hands on his apron. "You ever delivered to that place before?" "Once, a long time ago." "Why?" Sal didn't answer right away. He just handed me the bag and said, "Be careful out there." I wanted to ask more, but he disappeared into the back before I could. I shrugged it off, took the bag, and headed to my car. The first part of the drive was uneventful. The streets were empty, the moon was high, and the air was cold enough to fog up my windows. But as I turned onto Galloway Lane, the atmosphere changed. The houses here were old and dark, their windows like empty eyes staring out into the night. Most of them looked abandoned, their yards overgrown with weeds. The trees lining the street cast long, skeletal shadows across the cracked pavement. I drove slowly, checking the house numbers. 810, 812. And then there it was, 814. The house sat at the very end of the lane, surrounded by a chain-link fence. It was bigger than the others, but just as decrepit. The paint was peeling, the shutters were hanging crooked, and the porch light flickered weakly. I parked in the driveway, grabbed the bag, and made my way to the front door. The doorbell didn't work, so I knocked. The sound echoed through the house, but no one answered. "Hello?" I called out. "Delivery." Still nothing. I waited a minute, then knocked again, harder this time. Finally, I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, and heavy. The door creaked open, revealing a man who looked to be in his late 50s. He was tall and thin, with unkempt gray hair and hollow eyes. His clothes were wrinkled, and he smelled faintly of mildew. "You're early," he said, his voice raspy and uneven. I forced a smile. Yeah, I guess the kitchen was quick tonight." He stared at me for a moment, then reached for the bag. As he did, his hand brushed mine, and I swear it felt ice cold. "Thanks," he muttered, then slammed the door without another word. I was halfway back to my car when my phone buzzed. It was a call from an unknown number. Normally, I wouldn't have answered, but something about the timing made me pick up. "Hello?" A woman's voice came through, frantic and hushed. "Is this the delivery driver who just went to 814 Galloway Lane?" Yeah. "Who's this?" "Listen to me carefully," she said. "Whatever you do, don't leave. Get back in your car and drive away, but don't go home. He's going to follow you." "What? Who's going to follow me?" I asked, but the line went dead. I stared at my phone, my heart racing. Was this some kind of prank? I glanced back at the house. The porch light had stopped flickering. It was completely off now. I got in my car, locked the doors, and started the engine. As I pulled out of the driveway, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Sure enough, as I drove down the lane, I noticed headlights behind me. At first, I thought it was just another car, but as I turned onto the main road, the lights followed. No matter how many turns I made, the car stayed with me, its lights glaring in my rearview mirror. I tried to stay calm, convincing myself it was just a coincidence. But then the car sped up, closing the distance between us. It was an old black sedan, its grille dented and its paint scratched. It swerved back and forth, almost like it was trying to intimidate me. My hands were shaking as I gripped the wheel. I pressed down on the gas, speeding through the empty streets, but the sedan kept pace. Desperate to lose the car, I made a sharp turn onto a side street and sped into an abandoned parking lot. I killed the engine and ducked down, holding my breath. The sedan rolled past, its headlights sweeping over the lot. I stayed hidden, listening to the sound of its engine fade into the distance. I waited for what felt like an eternity before finally sitting up. My phone buzzed again. It was another call from the unknown number. "What the hell is going on?" I demanded as soon as I answered. "You need to leave," the woman said. "But you can't go home. He knows where you live." "Who is he? What does he want?" There was a pause. "He wants you to come back." The line went dead again. I was about to drive to the police station when another notification came through from the delivery app. Order number 3458. Pickup from Luigi's Pizzeria. Delivery to 814 Galloway Lane. My blood ran cold. Was this some kind of sick joke? I ignored the notification and turned off the app. But a few minutes later, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text. "You forgot something. Come back." The message was accompanied by a photo. My car, parked in the driveway of 814 Galloway Lane. Against my better judgment, I decided to go back. I didn't know what else to do. If this was some kind of elaborate prank, I needed to confront whoever was behind it. When I arrived, the house was completely dark. The front door was ajar, swinging slightly in the breeze. I stepped onto the porch, my heart pounding. "Hello," I called out. "I'm just here to pick up whatever I forgot." No response. I pushed the door open wider and stepped inside. The air inside was thick and musty, like the place hadn't been aired out in years. The walls were lined with old, faded wallpaper, and the floorboards creaked under my weight. "Hello," I called again, my voice echoing through the empty house. I made my way to the living room, where I found the delivery bag sitting on the coffee table. But something was off. It wasn't the same bag I'd brought earlier. This one was older, dirtier, and stained with something dark. I picked it up, my hands trembling. That's when I heard it, the sound of footsteps upstairs. I froze, my ears straining to catch any other sounds. The footsteps were slow and deliberate, moving toward the top of the staircase. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice cracking. The footsteps stopped. I backed away, clutching the bag like a shield. Suddenly, the front door slammed shut, plunging the house into darkness. I turned, trying to find my way back to the door, but a shadow moved in the corner of my eye. It was tall and thin, its shape vaguely human but wrong. Its limbs were too long, its movements too jerky. I bolted for the door, yanking it open and sprinting to my car. As I fumbled with my keys, I heard a voice behind me, a low, guttural whisper. "Come back." Food delivery had always been an easy gig. Sure, the late nights could be tiring, and some customers were demanding, but overall, it was straightforward. I never thought I'd feel unsafe doing it, until that one night. It started like any other shift. I logged into the app around 8 p.m., hoping to get some solid tips before the weekend. The first few deliveries were uneventful. Pizza to a college dorm, Chinese food to an office building, burgers to a suburban house. The typical stuff. But as the night wore on, something strange happened. Around 11:30 p.m., I got a notification for a new order. The pickup was from Golden Dragon, a Chinese takeout place I'd been to 100 times before. The destination? 4769 Briarwood Lane. I paused when I saw the address. Briarwood Lane was in a part of town I rarely went to, an older neighborhood with few streetlights and houses that seemed to be slowly rotting away. The tip, however, was incredible. $50 for a single order of fried rice and dumplings. It was too good to pass up. Golden Dragon was just as I remembered it, bright, bustling, and filled with the smell of soy sauce and sizzling woks. The order was already waiting for me at the counter, neatly packed in a brown paper bag. "Briarwood Lane, huh?" the cashier said as I picked it up. Her tone was casual, but there was a hint of something else, unease maybe. "Yeah," I replied, trying to match her casualness. "Why?" She hesitated, then shrugged. "It's just, not many people live out there anymore. That area's pretty much abandoned." I laughed it off. "Well, someone's still ordering takeout." She didn't respond, just gave me a tight smile as I left. The trip to Briarwood Lane took about 20 minutes. As I got closer, The streets became darker, the houses more spaced out. Eventually, the neighborhoods gave way to overgrown lots and crumbling buildings. When I turned onto Briarwood Lane, I immediately felt uneasy. The street was lined with tall, looming trees that blocked out most of the moonlight. The houses were old and decrepit, their windows dark and lifeless. It was as if the street had been forgotten by time. The GPS directed me to a house near the end of the lane. It was larger than the others, but just as run down. The paint was peeling, the yard was overgrown, and the front door was slightly ajar. I parked my car, grabbed the bag, and walked up to the porch. As I got closer, I noticed that the windows were completely black, not just dark, but unnaturally so, as if they had been painted over. The air around the house felt heavy, almost oppressive. I knocked on the door. Delivery for 4,769. No response. I knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. I checked the app to confirm the address. It was correct. Hello? I called, pushing the door open a little further. I've got your food. The house was completely silent. I stepped inside just a few feet and set the bag on a small table near the entrance. The air inside was cold and stale, carrying a faint smell of mildew. Enjoy your food, I said, my voice echoing in the empty space. Then I turned and hurried back to my car. I was halfway back to the main road when my phone buzzed. It was a call from an unknown number. Hello? I answered, expecting it to be the customer asking about their order. Why did you leave? A man's voice said, low and monotone. I felt a chill run down my spine. What? I left your food on the table by the door. You were supposed to come inside, the voice replied. I laughed nervously. I don't go inside houses. Company policy. There was a long pause. Then he said, you shouldn't have come here. The line went dead. The rest of the night was quiet. I did a couple more deliveries, trying to shake off the strange phone call. By the time I got home around 1 a.m., I had mostly convinced myself it was a prank, maybe a bored teenager or a weird neighbor. But when I opened the delivery app to check my earnings, I noticed something strange. The order to Briarwood Lane wasn't listed. There was no record of it at all. The app showed my last completed delivery as the one before that. Confused, I closed the app and went to bed, thinking it was just a glitch. That's when the messages started. At 2:13 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was a text from another unknown number. The message read, "Why did you leave?" I sat up in bed, my heart racing. A few seconds later, another text came through. "You're not safe." I blocked the number and put my phone on silent, but I couldn't sleep. Every creak in my apartment, every shadow on the wall made me jump. I eventually drifted off around 4 a.m., only to be woken by my phone buzzing again. The message was from a new number. "Look outside." I froze, my breath catching in my throat. Slowly, I got out of bed and crept to the window. There was someone standing on the sidewalk across the street. A tall figure, completely still, illuminated only by the faint glow of a nearby street lamp. I couldn't make out their face, but they were facing my apartment, watching me. I ducked away from the window, my heart pounding. I didn't know what to do. Call the police? But what would I tell them? That some creep was standing outside my building? When I finally mustered the courage to look again, the figure was gone. The next morning, I tried to brush it off as a bad dream. But when I opened my door to leave for the day, I found a brown paper bag sitting on my doorstep. It was the same bag I'd delivered to 4769 Briarwood Lane. I didn't touch it. Instead, I called the police. They arrived about 20 minutes later and examined the bag. Inside, they found the food I'd delivered, untouched, but with a piece of paper folded neatly on top. The paper had a single sentence written on it. "You shouldn't have come." The police tried to trace the call and texts but couldn't find anything. The number was unregistered, and there were no records of any recent activity at 4769 Briarwood Lane. When they went to check out the house, they found it completely abandoned. The neighbors told them no one had lived there for years. I deleted the delivery app that same day. I haven't taken an order since. But sometimes late at night, I think about the man's voice on the phone, the figure outside my window, and the warning in that note. And I can't help but wonder, if I hadn't left the food on the table, if I'd gone farther into the house, what would have happened? I've been working as a food delivery driver for about 2 years now. It's not glamorous, but it's simple. Pick up the food, drop it off, collect tips, and repeat. Most nights are uneventful. But last Saturday night changed everything. I've replayed that night over and over in my head, trying to make sense of what happened. The truth is, I can't. And I don't think I ever will. It was nearing midnight when I got the order. I'd planned to end my shift early since the tips had been disappointing, but this one caught my attention. The app pinged with a delivery request from a place I'd never heard of before, Black Hollow Bistro. The name sounded odd, but what really caught my eye was the payout, $1.75 for a single delivery. The restaurant was only 10 minutes away, and the drop-off location was listed as 73 Hollow Creek Road. I hesitated. I'd never heard of Hollow Creek Road, and the restaurant wasn't listed on any maps. Still, $75 was too good to pass up. I accepted the order. The directions led me down a quiet, unlit back road. After a few minutes, I spotted the restaurant. It was a small, unassuming building with a faded sign above the door that read Black Hollow Bistro in peeling gold letters. There were no other cars in the parking lot, and the place looked deserted. I almost thought I'd gotten the address wrong until I saw a dim light glowing inside. I parked, walked up to the door, and stepped inside. The interior was strange, old-fashioned, almost Victorian, with dark wood paneling and antique furniture. A single, pale woman stood behind the counter. She wore a black dress that looked more like a costume, and her hair was pinned up in a style I hadn't seen outside of period dramas. "You're here for the order?" she asked, her voice low and soft. Yeah, I said, feeling a little out of place. Without a word, she reached behind the counter and handed me a plain, black paper bag. It was heavier than I expected, and I could smell something faintly metallic coming from it, like blood or rust. "The address is already in your app," she said, her eyes meeting mine. "Deliver it quickly, and don't open the bag." Her tone sent a shiver down my spine, but I just nodded, mumbled a quick thanks, and left. As I followed the GPS, the roads became narrower and darker. Eventually, I found myself driving through thick woods. The trees loomed over the road, their branches twisting like skeletal hands. I rolled down my window slightly, hoping the cool air would calm my nerves, but instead, I noticed a foul smell, like rotting meat. It wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from the bag. I glanced at it sitting on the passenger seat, the black paper crinkling slightly as I turned a corner. I remembered the woman's warning, "Don't open the bag," but curiosity got the better of me. At the next stop sign, I reached over and carefully untied the knot on the bag. Inside was a large, white styrofoam container. I hesitated, then lifted the lid. The smell hit me first, overwhelming and nauseating. Inside the container was a raw, bloody piece of meat. It was massive, about the size of a football, and its surface was covered in thick, black veins. It didn't look like any kind of meat I'd ever seen before. It was wrong. I slammed the lid shut and retied the bag, my hands trembling. Whatever this was, it wasn't food. When I finally arrived at the address, I almost turned around and drove away. The house was enormous, but it looked like it hadn't been lived in for decades. The windows were boarded up, the roof sagged, and the yard was overgrown with weeds. But the most unsettling thing was the front door. It was wide open, as if the house was expecting me. I parked my car and stared at the house, debating whether to just leave the bag on the porch and go. But then my phone buzzed with a message from the delivery app. "Bring the order inside." There was no way the app should have been able to send me a message like that. My heart raced as I stared at the screen. Then, as if in response, the house seemed to grow darker, the shadows in the windows shifting unnaturally. Against every instinct, I grabbed the bag and walked up the creaking steps to the porch. The air inside was freezing, and the smell of decay was overwhelming. The entryway was empty, save for an old wooden table in the center. "Hello!" I called out, my voice echoing through the house. No answer. I placed the bag on the table, ready to leave, but as I turned toward the door, it slammed shut on its own. "Hello!" I called again, louder this time. Still nothing. Then I heard it, a soft, wet sound like something being dragged across the floor. It came from deeper inside the house. I backed away, my heart pounding. Suddenly the sound stopped, and a voice, deep, guttural, and inhuman, spoke from the darkness. "You open the bag." I didn't wait to hear anything else. I bolted for the door, yanking at the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Behind me, I heard heavy footsteps, growing louder and faster. I turned and saw something emerging from the shadows, a tall, hunched figure with elongated limbs and glistening gray skin. Its eyes glowed faintly in the dark, and its mouth was filled with rows of jagged teeth. I screamed and threw myself against the door, finally managing to burst outside. I sprinted to my car, jumped in, and sped off without looking back. When I got home, I deleted the delivery app and threw my phone in a drawer. I didn't want to risk getting another order like that, but the story doesn't end there. The next morning, I found the black paper bag sitting on my kitchen counter. The smell was gone, but the styrofoam container was still inside. I don't know how it got there, and I'm too afraid to open it again. Sometimes late at night, I hear soft, wet sounds outside my apartment door, like something being dragged across the floor. And every so often, I get a message from an unknown number. Bring it back,